Hey everyone, I'm Nicole Mendes. I'm your host for 10 Teams, 2 Rings, a Softball America podcast on the network of Softball America. I cover everything Big 12, and today we are just going to get right into it as usual. So we're going to round off with a little round the horn, see how things played out this previous weekend. We're going to get a good look on the players of the week. Also, people that I think you should know if you don't already from around the conference. And then we'll wrap it up with a little preview on how the Big 12 fares against the rest of the country and the conferences and the matchups that we have upcoming later this week. Once again, I'm your host, Nicole Mendes, and let's get right into it. Here we go. Now, excuse me if I sound a little delusional. I am. I'm a little delusional, and I think that's part, in fact, to the softball coma I induced myself into on Sunday. I had an unexpected day off. Oklahoma, they pushed their games and they had a doubleheader on Saturday. So I found myself all day Sunday with nothing to do except watch softball all day long. I did. I binged. I rotted on the couch. It was great. It was amazing. I loved every single second, but I have been delusional ever since. So excuse me if I sound a little crazy. Some of the Big 12 people will think I won't, but we'll get to that. Anyways, around the horn. So Oklahoma State, they won their series against BYU 2-1. The scores for that one: OSU won the first game 3-2. BYU won the second game 11-8. A lot of runs there scored by BYU. And then Oklahoma State came back with an answer, shut the door, 10-2, winning that third game. Then we have OU versus Baylor. OU played at home. They swept Baylor. That was one of 3 sweeps that happened this weekend. OU won 8-1, 12-3, and 7-4. Now, I think Baylor, they did not show their best outing this weekend. They've had some struggles in the Big 12, but there were definitely some high points. If they can get their pitching healthy, you'll see a different Baylor on the second half of the Big 12 conference as they get underway. Now, Texas versus UCF. Texas swept UCF. It was away. So that to me was such a fun series to watch. That to me was almost the best series of the weekend. Texas, they won their first game 5-0, second game 4-2, and third game 3-1. But those last 2 games, they were tight. They were exciting. I felt UCF battling back and forth. They made Texas better that series. And I think Texas came out of that happy that they didn't drop one. UCF, there was a couple of errors. There's a couple moments when it felt like their eyes got really big and panicked just a little bit. In Texas, they just took advantage, and that's what good teams do. That is why Texas is ranked number 2 in the nation. They had some really solid pitching throughout the weekend. We'll get to Tegan later, but I mean, she was stellar throughout the weekend as well. We have Kansas versus U of H. Kansas with their second sweep in the Big 12 conference. I know they have good pitching. I was not expecting them to be as good as they were. Kansas won the first game 4-3. The second one 11-4. Hello Bats. And then the last one is 2-1. Kansas, they're here. They are here. Their bats have woken up, and that has been the biggest thing for them as they try to get back into the swing of things, get back into the rhythm. They had really good pitching, but the bats have been silent or inconsistent. This past weekend, they had a couple of grand slams. They had a lot of RBIs. They had a lot of runners in action, a lot of movement in action. They looked really solid, not to mention their defense. They have been standing up for their pitchers. They have been backing them up. Several double plays, several great catches. Kansas, I think they are in an upwards trend. Hopefully, we'll see a good series this weekend out of them because they're looking pretty good. Last one, Iowa State versus Texas Tech. All games were canceled. So Get this, I spring has not sprung. It is the false spring. The groundhog was wrong. Iowa State, there was 5 plus inches of snow over the weekend. They're currently working with Big 12 to reschedule those games because both of those teams, they just lost out on 3 conference games, and that is huge. So for them, being able to remake that up and reschedule that is big time. Um, but all that to say, there's some chaos going on. There's a little bit of unexpectedness that we have going on in the Big 12, but I'm here for it. Again, if you're not a little bit delusional, if you're not a little bit crazy, what are you doing? And I think as a team in the Big 12, you have to be a little bit delusional. You have to be a little bit crazy because just the way these teams are playing, just the way that Big 12 has gone and trended so far this year. There are so many upsets. There are a ton of close games. There's some dark horses that have emerged and been really surprising to see and watch as they've navigated their conference. This has been fun. Going on to players to watch, you have the player of the week, Alina Torres from Oklahoma. She led the Big 12 in home runs with 4, 10 RBIs, a 615 batting average, and a 2.125 slugging percentage. That's nuts. Okay. That is crazy the way that her bat went off. She started off hot. Oklahoma and Baylor, they started off their series at the Hall of Fame. They had over 9,000 fans. Now, what that says for the sport, that on a Friday night, over 9,000 people are willing to come out to watch a softball game, that's unreal. That is trending upwards. That is making people more aware of the game and what's going on. And it's showing these people they're fans of the game. They want to watch this. They don't want to just hang out and go, oh, if I have free time, I'm gonna watch softball. No, it's something that they enjoy doing. So I thought that was so cool for that game to happen at the Hall of Fame. Great experience for Baylor to be able to be in that situation where they felt that pressure, they felt that crowd. Same thing for Oklahoma. They're wanting to get back to the World Series. They're wanting to get back and clinch that 4th national championship in a row. In order to do that, you have to be able to feel that crowd and be able to navigate through it. But Lena Torres, she came through clutch for Oklahoma that first game Friday night, hit a grand slam, and that was just the start of her weekend. It was pretty incredible. And then you have the pitcher of the week for the Big 12, Tegan Vaughn from Texas, lights out. I mean, I love whenever a freshman just steps it up, absolutely owns, and that's what she's been doing this year. She got her team out of a huge jam. UCF talked about how that might have been the series of the weekend, Texas versus UCF. There was their last game, and UCF, they were pounding on the door. They had bases loaded, and Kavon came in and she just shut the door. She completely deflated UCF, that rally that they were making. She had another complete game, had some solid 5 innings of work early on. She's the only Big 12 pitcher this week that had both a win and a save. She's been looking incredible. I've been so impressed with her and what she's been doing. I think whenever you're a freshman, you either come in nervous or you come in going, I got nothing to lose. And she's definitely the latter, but also being able to maintain that as season goes on, as conference goes on, that's difficult. So for her to be able to maintain that excellence, that's a good sign for Texas, not just as that famous OU Texas series approaches, but as the Big 12 tournament gets closer and postseason gets closer, you're going to want that ace. In Texas, they look like they're in good hands. All right, let's keep going. I think the player to watch. So this is somebody I feel like I talked about before. Caroline Wang from Oklahoma State. I loved her whenever she was at Liberty. And she recently got married, changed her name, and I was like, "Oh, wow, this girl is awesome." And I click on her profile and I see who she is, and I'm like, I know who that is. I'm already a fan of this girl. If you don't know who Caroline Wang is, she's a catcher for Oklahoma State. She's legit. She is legit. Her offense is the best for Oklahoma State. She is the most consistent and solid batter, in my opinion, for this Oklahoma State lineup. And you gotta get some catcher love. It's not easy to be a catcher, and the way that she does it is just she's so silent behind the plate. Not a lot of movement, but she's a really solid catcher as well. So it's the best of both worlds for Oklahoma State. I think this is an athlete that you should probably keep an eye out on as conference continues. But speaking about conference and it continuing, we're around the halfway home point. We have Big 12 rankings and standings. So I'm going to give you the rankings. I'm going to give you the standings, but I do want to talk a little bit about each team as we go. After I give the rankings, I would like to talk a little bit about the teams, just because how we start the conference, how it looks midway, and how you finish. Those are all very, very different aspects, very different points. And like I said at the beginning of the podcast, like this is a fun ride for the Big 12. They have looked fantastic as a whole. I think this is a super strong conference. That's why you see those tight matchups. That's why you see those upsets. This is the Big 12 that I remember from growing up, middle school, high school, up until now. This is the best that I have seen the Big 12 in a long, long time. So coming in at number one, you have OU. Number two, Texas. Number three, Oklahoma State. Number four, Kansas on the come up. Number five, Texas Tech. Number six, Iowa State. Now realize number five and number six, they did not play three of those games. So both of them are missing 3 games in their conference rankings. Number seven, you have Houston. Number eight, we have BYU. Number nine, UCF. And number 10, Baylor. So it shocked me. It shocked me a little bit looking at those rankings and looking at the Big 12 record. So Oklahoma, they're 9-0. Texas 8-1. Oklahoma State and Kansas are neck and neck. So I would say maybe not tied for third. Tied for third, Oklahoma State and Kansas. They're both 7-2. Texas Tech and Iowa State, they're 2-4. Houston and BYU, they're 2-7. UCF 2-7 as well. But Baylor, I knew they struggled. I knew that they had some tight games. Just seeing Baylor 1-for-8 in conference play just shook me. It really took me aback, and it's difficult because this past weekend they played Oklahoma, and Oklahoma, they're just so good. They are so good, and they are so consistent. And so that's difficult whenever you've had really, really tight games. But Baylor, they haven't been able to convert. They haven't been able to get gritty, get tough, and be able to push through that little extra hardness, that little extra oomph to be able to win a game. Whew, that's tough for Baylor. But we're only halfway through the conference. They're going to have to scrape and claw and scratch their way back. This definitely has hurt them as far as their rankings. They did a good job in preseason, so that'll save them come postseason time. But this conference play outing has not been kind to Baylor. I think they're a really good team. I just think their pitching isn't 100% healthy, and their team has to learn how to be tough. They're not quite there yet. They have the potential to be, but there's something that needs to change as far as the mentality of not necessarily, oh, I surrender, but being a little bit tougher, being able to say, I refuse to give up. I refuse to do this. I'm going to get on. I'm going to get this girl out. I want to see that a little bit more from Baylor. UCF, the same. I would say UCF and BYU, both of them have looked better than I expected them to be in Big 12 play. I know the rankings doesn't necessarily reflect that, especially with the 3 games missing from Texas Tech and Iowa State. I expect that might flip sometime soon, and we'll see how series goes. But BYU, they came out this past weekend, stole one from Oklahoma State. They're impressive. And speaking of impressive, I was informed of a really, really impressive BYU stat. So BYU, they have 31 sack bunts on their team. 31. Most teams, they'll probably have like 6, 8, like a lot is 12. They have 31. Now, Baynero has 13 of those sack bunts, but on top of that, she has 21 walks. We were talking, or like, man, if you need a quality at bat, you're going to have Baynero be in there for you. Like, you want that girl in there. I think BYU, they've gotten creative. They know that they're a step or two behind a lot of the talent in the conference. And they say, okay, maybe we can't compete head to head. we're going to get creative. We're going to move our runners over. We're going to have hit and runs. We're going to have action calls in. And I think that's why they have been able to compete in some of those games. That's why they stole one from Oklahoma State. And I'd love to see a team make adjustments mid conference, mid game, mid play. I got to give props to them. And also, I saw their field for the first time. It's beautiful. The backdrop, the way their field is set up, they have a backdrop of mountains in the background. I'm like, man, like where else can you get this view? Nowhere else in the Big 12. Let me tell you, I think that's by far the prettiest view in the Big 12. Um, Going on to Houston. Houston to me, Houston to me feels like Oklahoma State did about 5 years ago. Talented, has power. I don't even want to say inconsistent. I want to change it to undisciplined. They are good and they have the right talent. And I think what Just Vest has done in bringing in the coaches that she has brought in, a new pitching coach, a new hitting coach, they're going to be really good in about 2 or 3 years. But it's going to take time for the buy in to happen. It's going to take time. Okay, once you buy in, just understanding and learning and feeling that out as a player, as an athlete, that just takes time. Same thing on the pitching side. There has to be not just the buy-in, there has to be the process where I know it, I understand it, I'm able to replicate it and do it over and over and over again. I think Houston, they have a lot of work to go, but it's been really good for them to be in the Big 12 this year, getting in a little early, being able to get in and just see this kind of talent, especially Texas and Oklahoma before they head to the SEC. Being able to play 3 games, 6 games total against a 1 and 2 ranked team, that's huge, and that experience against having the best pitching, having the best hitting, that's only gonna make you better. So in the long run, I think Houston, they're gonna be a team to watch out for later on. Um, Texas Tech and Iowa State, right now, they're neck and neck. They obviously didn't get to play their games this weekend. Whenever I think of Iowa State, I normally think of them as scrappy, but they have one batter on their team who I'm just so impressed with. She has been not only consistent on their team, but just nationally, and that's Angelina Allen. She has done such a good job for the Cyclones and has just been clutch time and time and time again. I think Iowa State just needs one more person to step up, one more person to get things going. It's really hard whenever you're relying on just one person in your lineup to get that spark plug. Um, and then you have Texas Tech. Their offense, they got it going on. I won't lie. Texas Tech, they got it going on. They have solid offense. The pitching, the pitching needs to be more consistent. That is what is holding Texas Tech back just a little bit. If they can get better pitching, not necessarily by, oh my gosh, we need to get in a whole new staff. They have a solid staff, but better pitching as in being able to stay confident in what they have in throwing their stuff, being tighter on the corners, being able to feel your presence on the mound. I think they would get away with a couple more wins. But right now, the pitching staff, they look like they're struggling to find their identity as a whole, as a battery and individually. And it makes it really hard to respond as a team behind you. So I think once they figure that out, they're going to be a much deadlier weapon than they are now because of their offensive power that they have. You're going to have to respect them a little bit more if they're able to hold teams down on their runs. And what I'm saying, I mean, it's obvious, right? Everybody knows the team that scores the most runs, that's the team that's going to win. But it's so much easier said than done. So I know Texas Tech, they're working on that, they're grinding on that. But being able to find an identity as a battery, that's going to be big for them. That's going to be key for them as they start into the second half of the Big 12 conference. And then number 4 is actually tied for third, Oklahoma State and Kansas. If you told me that Oklahoma State and Kansas halfway through conference would be neck and neck tied, I would have been so shocked. I'm looking at these two teams and I love what Oklahoma State has done this year. I talked about it before, but just the way that they have been able to have a ton, maybe 12 plus tight games where the score is super tight or they're down or they have to hold a lead or the bases are loaded or they have to come in with a clutch hit time and time and time again. Oklahoma State this year, they've come through. I talked about it last week. I haven't done that in years past. This year, it feels different, and they have a really young team. So you combine those two things together. Oklahoma State, to me, is a dangerous team. They are a dangerous team ladder on into the season as it goes. If you're Kilfoyle, have confidence in that. Have confidence in your offense. Have confidence in your defense. And you're going to get some really, really good wins out of this. Kansas, they have found a groove. They have two stellar pitchers, but what they have been lacking has been offense. So a little bit on the flip side of what Texas Tech has been struggling with. They've been struggling with the offensive side, and their defense has been good. And it just really, they've picked one off here. They've picked one off there. They swept a series. And now again, they swept their second series. Their offense is clicking. It is coming together. Lyric Moore, she last year, she was one of the best hitters on their team. She's been a little quiet this year. Not anymore. This weekend, she showed up, showed out. She got loud. She's always solid behind the plate. I love to watch her interact with her battery, with her pitcher, and create that relationship. But whenever she's on in the box, it's a good sign for Kansas. Jennifer McFalls has done in a couple years for Kansas is incredible, and it's been really, really fun to watch that team this year. OU and Texas. I think everybody knows these are not only the two best teams in the conference, these are the two best teams in the nation. They are both so, so good. And what I love, and I think sometimes people talk about, well, there's a right way to do things and there's a wrong way to do things. And yes, typically there is, but there's no one way to win. There's multiple ways, multiple paths to be able to get there. And Oklahoma and Texas, the way they get there, very different. Very, very different, but both so, so good. I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but I cannot wait for that matchup in 2 weeks. I think the whole world is waiting. If one of their games is not on regular ESPN, I might scream. I might scream because what a shame for the sport if it's not. Such a good matchup, both of them. I think Texas, they have a great pitching staff that has really been able to strengthen their cause this year. Their offense is always solid. Their defense, they have moments where they're really high, but they have moments where they're a little shaky. But their pitching has come through time and time again to save them. Reference back to their games this past weekend against UCF. Bases loaded, got out of a jam. Cool as a cucumber. They're freshmen. Like, man, you just love to see that from her. Oklahoma, they finally have turned a corner, in my opinion, of what their consistency has looked like, because they always have power, but it was power in the fourth inning only. They would score a lot of runs in the first, and then they kind of cruise through the games. What I've seen from them the past 2 weekends, which makes you say, okay, they've turned that corner, is you're starting to see more complete games. They're present for almost all the innings, except for one. Maybe they take off one. But even then, in that one inning where they don't score, there's quality defense, there's quality pitching. So Oklahoma has definitely turned a corner. And then one thing I want to talk about is Big 12 versus everyone. There's a lot of talk of my conference is the best. No, my conference is the best. We all know SEC. They say their conference is the best. Is the last year of the Pac. Pac is wanting to be showing out. ACC, they're flexing their arm muscles a little bit. It's not just Florida State. There's a couple of other really solid teams that are emerging from that conference and becoming powerhouses in softball. But to that, I have to say OU. OU's the big one. Big Ten, they have flexed their muscles a little bit. You see Northwestern, you see Nebraska, But OU and Texas, they're the big ones. They're the big ones for me. And the reason why I say that is because in the Big 12, you get to play number 1 and number 2. And being able to play a 3-game series against them, it makes your team better. It makes your team perform to a postseason style of play. And not only that, you have number 1 ranked Oklahoma, number 2 ranked Texas, number 7 ranked Oklahoma State, number 18 ranked Kansas. That is such an advantage. And whenever I think sometimes people shy away from having to boss up, having to get beaten a little bit so you know where you need to be. In this conference, you can't go, oh, we're just not going to schedule a game against you. You have to play them. And you might not want to, but it's gonna make you better. And I think years and years and years of playing each other, you've seen Oklahoma get better. You've seen Texas get better. You've seen Oklahoma State get better. You've seen Baylor get better. Heck, you've seen Kansas get better. And that has been just such a ride for the Big 12. Currently had three teams in the top 10, tied with SEC. They have Kansas sitting at 18. The ACC, they have 2 teams in the top 10. In the Pac, they have 2 teams in the top 10. But sitting at the very top of the rankings, number 1 and number 2, you have Oklahoma and Texas. I cannot talk enough about how much better that makes your team whenever you get to play that level of talent. How much better you have to be, because whenever you play Oklahoma, whenever you play Texas, you're going, I got to give them my best. I want to beat them. And you play to a whole nother level, and you get to see your potential. You get to see where it is. Oh man, like I can play here. Maybe I can play here for 2 games. Maybe I can play here for 3 games. Maybe I can play here all season. And it just requires everybody to level up, play to a different level. I think we're going to see some upsets in postseason. I This is a year of upsets, period. But I think we're going to see some upsets in postseason as some Big 12 teams get into the tournament. You're going to see them be tough because they've played against very, very tough teams. Upcoming matches for this weekend: Oklahoma State versus Texas. To me, this one is a no doubter. You have to watch this game. It's going to be so good. This series is going to be on ESPN Plus, save on Friday. Now, remember, all the series this weekend, they're going to be Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So Thursday, ESPN Plus. Friday, the game is going to be on ESPN2. And that game is airing at 7 p.m. And then Saturday at 1 p.m., we'll wrap up the series for OSU and Texas. OU and Kansas will be available on ESPN Plus Thursday at 5, Friday at 5, Saturday at 12. Then you have BYU versus U of H. BYU is hosting. You're going to get that beautiful, beautiful view again. Those games will be airing at 6 p.m. Thursday, 6 p.m. Friday, and 1 p.m. on Saturday. Then you have Baylor hosting Iowa State, and I think Baylor needs this host. Them being able to play at home in their own environment, I think this is going to give them a much needed energy boost and just a much needed confidence booster. Getting a couple of wins against Iowa State would be huge for them. So they play Thursday 6:30, Friday at 2 p.m., and Saturday at 12. And last but not least, you have UCF and Texas Tech. They play Thursday at 6, Friday at 6, Saturday at 12. I think that one will be interesting. Will it be the best teams that you've ever seen? No. But will it be a really good back and forth battle? I think yes. UCF, they have some really good pitching. They're going to give Texas Tech batters a run for their money. And I think that if Texas Tech is able to figure out a solid game plan, a solid approach for UCF, they're going to find success. There are holes in UCF's lineup that Texas Tech can't expose. They have the style of pitchers to do it, but the game plan has to be spot on. Everybody has to buy in. If that happens, I think the UCF and Texas Tech series will be another really fun one to watch. OU and Kansas, I mean, Kansas right now, they have been on the come up. They've been on the rise. Will they steal one from Oklahoma? I don't know. I don't think so, but I think 2 of those games are going to be really tight. I don't think Kansas will get run ruled all 3 games at all. I think maybe 1. But Kansas, they've been looking solid. And whenever your bats are hot as a team, bats are hot. So I think that one is going to be a fun one to watch. But Oklahoma versus Texas, for me, that's the game to watch. OSU, they're preseason tough. They're conference tough. They are tight game tough. They know how to win when their backs are against the wall. Texas, their talent has just shined this year. Now, I will say there have been times where they falter. Their defense, especially, their defense falters. And their defense gets a little bit too big. And they're going to be playing at Oklahoma State, not at their home. And Oklahoma State fans, they're loud. So if you're a defense, you hear them. They let you know that they're there. If I'm Texas, I am honing in on my defense this week because once this weekend comes, you just want everything to be running like clockwork. The pitching, great. The hitting, great. You just want that defense to be on par with everything else. As always, I'm your host. I'm Nicole Mendes for 10 Teams, 2 Rings. Thank you guys for joining me. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. Make sure to like and subscribe to Softball America, and I'll see you guys next week.